What's up, everybody? This is the Ike Inspirations podcast, and today we have a great guest on named Mitch. Mitch is an incredible entrepreneur. He's a serial podcaster, and he has a lot going on. He's also a success coach, and I believe he has valuable wisdom and life experiences to share with the audience. So I'm excited to have him on. Mitch, can you please do us a favor of introducing yourself to the audience and just giving a brief story of who you are?
Sure, absolutely. So I am a podcaster, kind of habitual podcaster. I've got two podcasts. One is called Dream, Think, Do, which I'm wildly blessed to say is in the top 1% of all podcasts, which is fun. It is a podcast that focuses on strategies and stories to help people to dream bigger, think better, and do more of what they were put on the planet to do. And I do feel like in some ways that's what I'm put on the planet to do, is help other people figure out what they were put on the planet to do. So I do that through the podcast, but I also do that through success coaching 101. I'm a speaker and get to be a keynote speaker around the country. And then a big part of our business now is also helping other encouragers, what we call coaches, speakers, and content creators, to build businesses that they love that also pay them really well. So that's my other podcast, which is called Encouraging the Encouragers. And that is a podcast where I throw out strategies and stories to help the encouragers, the coaches, the speakers, the content creators to not only be able to encourage people and encourage themselves, but to build a business and a life that they love. So yeah, so that's kind of, I realized, I was put on the planet to help people figure out why they were put on the planet. And I love doing that through, Dream, Think, Do, and through one-on-one coaching and through speaking. But I realized if I'm really going to have the impact that I want to have, I've got to equip other encouragers to do what I do and to then also get paid well to do it, so they keep doing it. And that's kind of where I found the sweet spot. And it's really been an awesome journey so far. And so I'm excited to talk with you about what you're doing, Ike, because it sounds like you're doing the very thing that we love to see people do, is to have an impact and truly, influence and help the people they feel called to help, but also hopefully get paid well to do it. So
I'm here. Then thank you, and I love it. Our vision and our purpose aligns. On the Ike Inspiration podcast, we're all about trying to help other people figure out who they are and what they want to do by having other guests and other perspectives. Someone might really resonate with Mitch, someone might really resonate with another guest, and from there they learn more about themselves. And I love that. And I want to focus on your purpose, which you said is helping other people find out what they're supposed to do, which I think is really powerful, because I personally believe one of the hardest things in this world to do is to really know what you really want to do. I know that kind of sounds like weird, because how do I not know what I want to do? But I feel like a lot of people go into something, think that's what they want, and then they end up quitting or stopping whatever because they thought they wanted it, and then they get into it only to realize, this is not for me. I'm sure as a coach, you probably experienced that thousands of times. Why do you think that's the case, and how do you help people with that?
Yeah, I love that. So I think it's a really important question to ask, is like, okay, why am I here? What am I called to do? What do I want to do? What's my sweet spot? What am I naturally good at? And then, is it something I should turn into a career, or is it just something I should do on the side while working a regular job? I have a book called Dream Job Redefined, and I interviewed 200 different people that were in what they would describe dream jobs. And what was interesting is about half of them found those dream jobs, and about half of them created those dream jobs. So that was a really interesting thing, is to find out that some people were able to find a role that pre-existed, that they, whether it's a butcher, baker, candlestick maker kind of role, they were able to, in some cases, work their way up, a chain of command within an organization. And that does happen. But then for a lot of people, it was more a matter of, that dream job didn't exist. So they found they needed to create it, whether it was to create their own company or create their own nonprofit. In some cases, they were able to create it within somebody else's organization. But in most people, if they were creating their dream job, they were they were starting their own company, they were starting their own nonprofit, that kind of thing. So it led to a lot of fascinating conversations. And of course, when you look at somebody else's life, and especially if they say they're in a dream job, you look at their journey and it always looks like a straight line. But with every interview, as you well know, there's no straight lines. There's a lot of, surprise turns and curves and ups and downs and those types of things. So part of it is also celebrating that journey, but also realizing there are seasons to finding a dream job or finding what you really want to do. And I think that's one, like, if you were going to ask me, where do you start that journey, is one of the things is I always say, especially if your audience is a little bit younger, 20s, 30s, those types of things, I think where a lot of people get stuck is they're trying to find the dream job, the dream career that's going to be the end all be all dream for the rest of their life. And I say that, especially with doing those 200 interviews, almost everybody that was in a dream job had held or created other dream jobs. And then, as I like to say, each dream job tends to have a back door, which will then lead you to another dream job, especially if you continue on that journey. But to try to say, oh, I want to find that thing that I am going to do for the next 30 to 40 years, that's one, unrealistic. And two, it puts a ton of pressure on yourself to say, oh, I've got to find that thing and then I'm never going to deviate from it. Well, that's not how it works. So I often say is, all right, for the next 2 to 3 years, what types of things would you love to be learning? For the next 2 to 3 years, what kinds of things would you love to experience? For the next 2 to 3 years, what feels like your sweet spot right now? I know for me, my personal journey, when I first started out in my career, I started in sales because I had quite a bit of experience with that growing up. I grew up in a small town and I was really passionate about bicycles. And there was one bike shop in town and I loved that place. And I pretty much stalked the bike shop owner, when I was 13, just to do anything that I could to get a job there. I mowed his lawn without his permission. I swept out the alley behind the bike shop. I wiped down bikes and the counters and things like that without even being asked to, just because I wanted a job. And I got a job there at 13, which I think probably broke some laws somewhere, but it was amazing, right? I got my first dream job at 13. But what was interesting about that is I got the job because I was passionate about bicycles. But within about a year, I realized my passion wasn't actually with bicycles. Like the sustaining passion wasn't the bicycles. In fact, I got less and less interested in bicycles the longer I worked there. I kept buying them because that's what you do. But like, I got less and less interested in bicycles and more interested in entrepreneurship, right? But that was a season change. When I first got there, the season was I was wildly passionate about bicycles. But once I got into that dream job, the back door of that dream job was to realize, actually, I'm really passionate about entrepreneurism. And so I started to learn about entrepreneurism and I started to learn about sales. Like it's Ike, you'll appreciate this, but like, in my teen years, I was reading books about sales, which did not make me popular in high school, but it definitely made me a lot more money. Right.
Yeah.
And so when I got done with college, I went into corporate business to business sales and then pharmaceutical sales. And so for that season of my life, the thing I knew I wanted to be learning was basically sales, right? I had with my time in the bike shop, almost 10 years in the bike shop, I'd had a real season with entrepreneurism and sales. And then in this case, what I wanted to do was to really learn how to navigate high ticket sales. And so I went into pharmaceutical sales and, a couple of different business to business sales opportunities for about a decade, to really learn to learn the relational sell and to learn how to basically sell high ticket items. And I thought, there's not really a better way than to get paid by someone else to learn something that you want to learn. And so that's what I did really well in pharmaceuticals. But then I got promoted into a bad fit job, which at the time was brutal. I knew it within just a couple of days, like, oh
Mm.
no, this is like not a good fit for me. It was
Yeah.
one of those jobs that started killing my soul. But it was also a wake up call to say, okay, well, I think this season might be ending. What's the next season? And so I took 2 years. I worked that bad fit job. I did a good job with it. I still delivered results. I did everything my company asked me to do. But during that time, I also realized, you know what? I feel like my next season is going back to entrepreneurism. And so I
Mm.
started to work on building my own business, a training company with coaching and speaking on the side. And so I was doing that on the side of this bad fit job. And in that next season, my next dream was to then build my own company, launch my own company, and grow my own company. And I was able to do that. 2 years later, 2 years of that bad fit job, I had a healthy business on the side that I was able to then walk into full time. And we've been doing that ever since. So I always say,
Wow.
don't force yourself to say, hey, I got to know what the dream job is for the rest of my life. I
Mhm.
often say, hey, what do you think that dream job might be? Or what do you want to be learning? What do you want to be experiencing? Or what do you want to be doing for the next 3 years? And then go after that and learn as much as you can, earn as much as you can, and grow as much as you can. And oftentimes, as you do that, you will get further clarity on what the next dream job is. Does that make
Wow.
sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a handful, but you pretty much like weaved us through your journey of how you basically transitioned into becoming a success coach. And
Right.
it's very valuable information because I think part of the journey is also realizing what we're not. And I feel like
Right.
by not realizing what we're not, we become more of who we are. And I think that's a very
Yep.
important thing because it's like it gives you
Yes.
greater perspective of what you don't like, and you can just keep
Yep.
avoiding that to focus on what you are. So I love that. And to speak more about that and your transition into a success coach, what has this being a success coach been like, and how do you provide value uh to your audience, and also what kind of people have you met along your way? Because I'm very curious to hear
Sure. I
about that.
love that. Yeah. So, what's interesting about coaching, and we now have, I still coach one-on-one executives, entrepreneurs, founders, but about half of my coaching clients are encouragers, coaches, speakers, content creators. Um, and I love helping them to actually build businesses, and to
Mhm.
actually launch and successfully sustain a coaching and speaking business, those kinds of things. But one of the things that I found, especially when I'm coaching executives,
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, founders, is as a coach, one of the best ways that I can bring value is to not actually have the answers. It's to
Mm.
actually ask questions and then create a space for them to uncover their own solutions. And I know
Mm.
that might sound pithy or airy fairy and rainbows and butterflies. But what's interesting is I'm pretty expensive as a
Yeah.
coach. So I tend to attract somebody that's already successful, but
Okay.
oftentimes what they do is they hire me to become more successful or to make a change in their career and do something new,
Mm.
something different. And what's interesting is that I've found, especially as a coach, my job is not to come in there and tell them exactly what to do. My job as a coach is to ask them questions to help them uncover the solution they already know they have.
Yeah.
And some people would say, like, why would I pay somebody thousands of dollars to ask me questions to help me know something I already know?
Yeah.
But what's interesting is most people, they do know it deep down in their heart of hearts. Like they know what that next step might be. They
Yeah.
know what their solutions could be. But oftentimes they need a safe place to be
Mhm.
able to just voice those things, to clarify those things. They need a safe place to vet big ideas. They need a safe place to vent frustrations. They need
Yeah.
to, have a safe place to celebrate. They need to have a safe place to commiserate. And so as a coach, that's what I get to do for them. And it might sound odd, but I tell my clients right from the start, I said, my job is to coach myself out of a job. And people would be like, what are you even talking about? And I'll say, well, if I coach myself out of a job, I'm never out of work as a coach
Yeah.
because I don't want somebody to become reliant on me. I want somebody to become empowered because they worked with me. And
Mm.
so, oftentimes what I'm asking them is I'm repeating some questions, and they'll start to expect them. So like, what's something good that happened between this call and last call? Like what breakthrough, big or small, happened between this call and the last call? What's something you did that you said you were going to do? What's something you did between this call and the last call? And it's funny because, by the third or fourth call, and I ask, of course, other questions too, but by about the third call, they're like, I know what questions you're going to start with. And they'll just start telling me like, this thing happened. Like, I couldn't believe it. I took the step, it worked, blah, blah, blah. Or I took the step, it went down in flames, but I got back up fighting. And, today I want to try this. What do you think? Those kinds of things. And again, it might sound strange to pay someone thousands of dollars where my goal is to coach myself out of a job. But like truly, when you work with talented people and hold them capable, they feel that and oftentimes are energized by that, as opposed to, hopefully you've never had this experience, but I know some people, when they work with a coach, they come on and the coach basically makes them feel like the coach has all the answers. They don't have answers. And shouldn't they be grateful for this coach? And one, I don't like that feeling, and I wouldn't want to put that feeling on anybody else. But two, I do hold my clients as capable, and they rise to that. And that's what I want to see more of in the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge power to asking questions. Most of the time in this podcast, I'm asking questions, and I think questions are so powerful because it allows you to engage with a person on a more personal level. People love talking about themselves, and I feel like people are coming to you. People are coming to you to help themselves, not really help you. So they don't want to hear you talk all day long. They rather just hear them really talk about what they feel like is bothering them so that they can get the issue resolved. And I think that's really good that you're doing that. And so I'm really curious, man, like what are some really powerful questions that you ask some of your clients that where you saw it in their eyes and they had a breakthrough moment, or was it not like that? Were there any personal questions that you would like that really just like lit the light bulb out of someone and really changed the way they look at something or reframe their life?
Yeah, I love it. So I mean, it's funny because some of my coaching clients, again, when I'm working with entrepreneurs and executives and founders, oftentimes they don't have someone above them. A lot of people within an organization will have a manager or a leader that's above them, and they're doing maybe annual evaluations, or they might have, somebody they report to, and hopefully they're getting some encouragement, some coaching from that person. But a lot of the people that I work with, they're kind of top of the food chain. They're often the CEO of the company, and yes, they might have a board they have to report to, but they don't have a lot of people that are like pouring into them and, helping them to self-evaluate and kind of dream for themselves and things like that. And so, one of the things that's interesting is, I don't come into those situations saying, hey, okay, what are your dreams? What are your goals? Right? Like those are important questions, but I don't typically start there, because even with the most successful people, oftentimes, if you ask them what their goals are, they will very quickly point to the goals of their organization, or very quickly point to the goals of their team. And those are things that are important, right? Those are things they're probably working on very diligently. But I don't want to get into the goals of their team or their organization. If that's a part of our coaching, that's fine. We can do that. But I want to get clear on what their goals are for themselves personally. And what's interesting is that, again, oftentimes we default to either goals that have been assigned to us or goals that we've been told to have, maybe by an uncle or a dad or a parent or something like that. We know we should have these things, right? But I don't necessarily want to talk about those things. So I don't generally start off with the questions of goals and dreams, because those can be trigger words for some people, right? Or they'll just assume that I want a certain type of answer. And so they'll just kind of default to that. So one of my favorite questions is to say, what kind of experiences do you want to have more often? What kind of experiences do you want to have more often? And what's interesting is that they don't have a conditioned response to that question. The goals question, they have a conditioned response.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, I know what goals are. I know what my goals should be. I'll tell you this. But when I ask, what do you want to experience more often? They don't have a rote response. They don't have a habitual response. But what's interesting is it does help us get to goals and dreams, because somebody allows themselves to really think about that. Oftentimes what I hear is, I want to feel peace more. I want to feel joy more often. I want to feel personal satisfaction more often. I want to be in the moment more often. I want to enjoy my family, or I want to enjoy relationships more often. That's the kinds of things I want to experience. And what's beautiful about that is like, oh, we can get to work on that.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful about something like that is it tends to lead to life-changing experiences, but also some of the fruit of that often also tends to be they start to run their business more effectively. They start to put up healthy boundaries. They start to live, in a way where they're actually taking care of themselves and their bodies, and, working on personal focus and things like that. But kind of a surprisingly simple question of asking about experiences is a great place to start.
I love that question. I really do. What do we want to experience more? And I feel like that's something that we don't ask ourselves. Obviously, everyone is like, oh, what are my dreams? What are my goals? But then I feel like oftentimes when that question is asked, the ego starts kind of being like, oh, I got to make $1 million and do all this. And it's like a surface level answer. It's not really what you truly want. And it goes back to what I said in the beginning. We don't really know what we want. We think we know what we want. Like, everyone dreams of becoming a millionaire, including me. But it's like, for what? What none of us even experienced that. What does that mean? What is it going to How does that change our life?
If you ask that, if you say that, like, I want to be a millionaire, one of the questions I would ask is, what experiences do you think being a millionaire will get you?
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is, that's a good question to ask yourself, because oftentimes some of those things, maybe you would feel like, when I ask that, like, what experiences do you think being a millionaire will give you? As you think about that, like, what would be some responses to that for you personally?
This is interesting. For me, when I think about being a millionaire, I think it gives me the freedom to do what I want when I want. When I think about becoming a millionaire, I also feel like I have the power to make changes that I don't have now, and to give more abundantly. That's what I think about when I become a millionaire. That's really why it's important for me to get there, because I would love to help more people, at least the people I love in my life, more.
Yeah. What I love about that is, and I'm glad, I bet you're recording this or whatever, so like, obviously you'll be able to look back on it. But what I love about that are the 3 things you listed, right? To be able to do more of the things that you want to do, to have more impact, to be able to help the people that you love. What's beautiful about those things, those 3 experiences, you will be able to do that when you have more money. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
But you also can start to experience those things right now.
Yeah.
And that's what we start to do, is to say, because what's interesting is oftentimes we think the destination is what's going to allow us to do the thing. But sometimes doing the thing is what allows us to get to the destination.
Yeah.
See, like, you having a podcast, right? Yeah. You may not be a millionaire yet, but you having this podcast is actually allowing you to do some of the thing that you want to do when you're a millionaire, is have impact on people that you care about, to have more of an impact on the world. So what's wild about that is to go, I think some people are like, wait, don't I need to wait, for the thing to hit the finish line, to have the mile marker? Don't I need to wait for the thing to actually have the experience? Like, well, actually, no. If you have the experience, acknowledge the experience, celebrate the experience now, it's often going to make you better at what you're doing in this moment, but it's also going to make it a lot more sustainable.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I absolutely love what you're saying, man, because I feel like a lot of people, we have this misconception that once I get X, Y, Z. Once I get this many sales, or once I get this many views, or once I get this many money, X, Y, and Z will happen. And I don't know where that misconception or that false premise comes from. You've had a lot of people you've coached. Why do you
Right.
think that mindset? Where does it derive from? Is it like why is it so popular?
Right. Well, it's the destination mentality. We call it the
Yeah.
destination mentality or the achievement mentality. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'll never forget we had somebody come through our coach training. We have coach training it's coach certification, but it's also a business launch training. And we had somebody come through that was a professional athlete. They had been a professional baseball player. And we talk about the importance of celebrating along the journey, not just the destination. And I'll never forget this former professional baseball player. It was at a live event, raised his hand and pretty abruptly, like, I couldn't disagree with you more. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me about that. He said, well, one coach that I had would not allow us to celebrate the wins until we won the pennant. I was like, okay, well, did you win the pennant? He said, we did. And I said, well, what was that season like? He said, the season sucked. I was like, why? And he's like, well, we couldn't celebrate along the way. And I said, do you think if you would celebrate it along the way, what do you think that would have done to your journey? And he's like, I would have made it a lot more fun. We probably would have felt like a lot tighter team. Cause he said, we went on to win the pennant, but at the same time, we hated each other. We were so ready to get out of that locker room. Nobody really liked each other. All that, we were basically the only time we really performed well together was on the field, but every other time there wasn't any of it. I was like, all right, well, what do you think that journey would have been like if you could have celebrated along the way? And he's like, it would have been a lot more fun. I think we would have, been a lot more tight as a team. And, he's like, we did win the pennant, but basically we all went our separate ways after that. I'm like, yeah, okay. He's like,
Right.
okay, I think I get it. Right. And it's that thing of, I'm not saying, celebrate with a party or a trip to Disney or a toga extravaganza, some sort of craziness every time you have a small win, but to acknowledge the small wins, to celebrate the small wins as you go, it makes the experience a lot more enjoyable, but it also makes it a lot more sustainable. So I do think, oftentimes, whether it was a teacher, a coach, a parent, we are often told, well, you shouldn't celebrate until you get that thing, whatever it is, you run across the finish line, you get that big project done, whatever it is, X is behind you. But oftentimes, that thing happens where you check it off your to-do list and then you're just on to that next thing. And one of the biggest things that, at least, in the workplace in the United States, one of the things they are talking about right now is anxiety and worry are through the roof, and burnout is at an all-time high. And I think one of the big solutions for burnout is truly celebrating along the journey, not just the destination.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I even that story you told with the baseball player was very interesting to me, because one thing I've noticed is that I like how you approach asking him questions instead of like telling him what to do, which I feel like the world constantly does to us. Like, you say, oh, you got to do this, or you got to do that, or you got to do this. And I feel like no one likes being told what to do. So even if you are telling them the truth and you're helping them, they're not going to receive it because they don't feel like that answer or idea was theirs. And that's something that I have been recently realizing for my life. And if I truly want to help someone, I have to remove my ego and the credit of, hey, I'm telling you what to do, and ask the person the question so they can come to the realization themselves and actually implement the answer. So I love what you're saying. And one thing that was very interesting to me, Mitch, is you're mentioning CEOs, leaders, executives who are all like coming to you for whatever problems. And I probably have listeners, including me, who is thinking, man, these guys are incredibly successful. They can pay a man like Mitch thousands of dollars to do it, which is an indicator of their success, at least financially. Why are they coming to you? What problems are they having? And what do you feel like is a common problem that CEOs or executives are having? Is it like a business thing? Is it more of a spiritual thing? Is it a physical issue? What's going on? Like,
Yes, just yes. all the stuff. Like, it's funny. But what's interesting is, and this is something we talk about in our coach training as well. It's important to figure out kind of your ideal client. Like, who do you do your best work with? And I do on my, success coaching side of the house. I do my best work oftentimes with founders, high level leaders, entrepreneurs. But what's interesting is that I also have what we call a micro niche, like being clear on your niche, just like in general of maybe it's a position, maybe it's an industry, maybe it's a certain kind of person, whatever. Like knowing your niche is important, but also understanding your what we call a micro niche. And a micro niche is oftentimes a smaller subset of that bigger niche that you only find by doing the thing. And oftentimes a micro niche will present itself. And that's with coaching, that's oftentimes where the big opportunities and the biggest payoff is. But this is true of just about any business. But as an example for me, my micro niche is oftentimes it's high level leaders who are needing to make a big decision they don't want anybody else to know about yet. Now, you won't see that anywhere on my website because oftentimes these high level leaders are having their organization pay for the coaching. So they don't want to see this blaring thing on my website that says, I help high level leaders make decisions they don't want anybody else to know about. But that's what I do. That is something I'm very, very good at. And what's interesting about a micro niche is oftentimes a micro niche, it starts to present itself. But then oftentimes a micro niche is referral driven. So I will help one leader make a big decision. And sometimes it's a decision to sell a company. Sometimes it's a decision to move a company. Sometimes it's a decision to look to retire or, to set up a succession plan, those types of things, big decisions. And it's very rarely I made a huge mistake or made some sort of, big, created a problem. It's oftentimes with the people that I get to work with, they're trying to make the best decision for their company. But for them, some of these big decisions, they don't want to take them to their team yet. They eventually will, but they want to sort through some of it themselves first because they know, like, if they take the idea of moving the company or potentially selling the company to their team, their leadership team first, or their board, that's going to cause all sorts of stress and things that they may, in fact, not, kind of battles they may not have to fight if they first think through it and go, no, that's a bad idea. Or no, I maybe need to do something different. Like, those kinds of things. So I help them sort through some of those big decisions before they take that next step and involve, that next person. Like one of my most recent coaching clients started his company. It was wildly successful and he was getting tired. And so he was thinking about, do I sell this thing? There were a number of suitors that wanted to buy his company, but he also, his family, some of his kids were involved. He's like, do I just give the company to my kids? Do I give it to the employees? Do I sell it to the employees? All those things. These were all really good options, but he wanted to just talk through it first with somebody, for me, my only bias is that they are successful and happy and, that it's all legal and all those kinds of things. Those are my biases. Almost everybody else that high level leaders needing to involve in the question, in the solution probably is a little biased or, they're going to be impacted by whichever decision is being made. I'm not biased in that way. So that's a micro niche for me. And, it's one of those things that what's interesting about that is that often when I help a high level leader do it and navigate that, they usually have at least one, if not two, sometimes three friends that are navigating something similar. So almost all of my coaching business now is referral based.
Wow.
Which I'm wildly blessed to say. Wow. And so that's something we also help coaches to do is to find their micro niche because, once you hit the micro niche and clarify that, then oftentimes it becomes very referral based. So you don't have to be on social media all the time. You don't have to have a huge email list. You don't have to have a huge following, those kinds of things. So,
And the fact that you're getting referral-based inquiries is a testament to your service. That means that you're doing a good job. Obviously, people don't refer people who are doing a good job. So that means that your product must be good, which is you yourself, which is good, man. And as you were speaking, I just find it very interesting because, I'm putting my mind in the shoes of some of these leaders. And the reality is, because they're in the top of the food chain and there's only one of them and it's hard for them to be replaced, there's no one that they can relate to. And it seems like because they don't have many people they can relate to, it's hard for them to talk about these decisions. And it seems like it's just weighing on themselves because, you can't talk to your wife about, she can probably support you, but what does she know? And it's,
well, that's one of my clients recently was thinking about moving his company. And it would have made sense for him financially, but he needed to think through it first before he even talked to his spouse. And it wasn't he was trying to hide it from his spouse, but he knew that if he took that to his spouse before he had really vetted the idea, he was probably he knew his spouse was going to be supportive, but he also knew she would start to look at real estate sites and to figure out what they would need to do is sell their current home and what does the market look like where they might move and what do the schools look like and what would it mean to the kids and when would be the ultimate time to move and how it, and he's like, I don't want to cause that stress. He's like, I know she would be supportive, but I don't want to cause that stress until I've done a little bit more thinking. Same thing with his team. Like he knew his team would be open to it, but some of his team would say, oh yeah, let's do it. Cause they wanted to move south. Right. Or some of his team might be, kind of shutting it down because they have kids in school and don't want to move, those kinds of things. And he's like, I don't want to cause that stress if I don't need to. And in his case, he decided to not move the company. He decided to make some other changes to impact their performance and some of the other things. And so he never had to bring that up with his team.
Wow, yeah. And so it sounds like a lot of the work you do as a success coach is like therapeutic, and you're really it's almost like therapy where it sounds like you're helping them find themselves and really align themselves with who they are so they can make the best decision for ultimately themselves and whoever they're leading, right?
Yeah,
man.
That's definitely. It's funny. One of my CEOs that I work with, and I've worked with him for 3 years. He said, "You are my coach," but he said, "I always have a little corporate therapy with you." He's like, it's also the safe place where we're working on some of these big goals, but if we need to take 15 to 20 minutes to talk about a challenging conversation he has to have, or something that's going on in his family, those kinds of things. It's like you said, he's at the top of the food chain. So he has a couple of peers at other organizations in positions, but he doesn't have a lot of people. He really doesn't have anybody that he could go to in his company and just have the conversation about the hard decision or the hard conversation without there probably being some potential ripple effects, that kind of thing. So so I get to be that person for a lot of my clients.
And talking about a dream job, man, I'm not gonna lie, your job sounds really fun. I wish I had it, man.
It's pretty cool.
It's really cool and unique and very interesting. I mean, obviously it has its problems and challenges, but very unique ones that I would love to engage with. That sounds like a fun thing. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about, Mitch, was because for me, I am a leader and I have a strong desire to create communities. And something that I've personally have noticed in my life is that the things that I enjoy doing the most are like what we mentioned in the beginning, things that we created. I created this podcast. I love this podcast. I love what I do. I engage. I get to meet incredible people like you. I've created certain communities. I've created a Bible study with my friends. We do every Saturday, and it's good. We get closer to God. We get, and we have just great conversations about what aligning ourselves with God looks like. But I've just noticed from time in and thank you, sir, that from time out, every time I create an opportunity or a community, I do good for other people, but I also find myself so much more engaged and loving with what I do. So I want to be in more positions to create opportunities and tribes. And what does that look like? Because I know you've done it successfully. And how can people do that? Because I think creating your own tribe, creating your own community can bring a lot of joy and excitement to people because you attract like-minded individuals.
Absolutely. So, part of it is asking yourself, do you need to drive income from it?
Mm.
Right? Because that is an important question to ask. And it doesn't necessarily, it's not a bad question. That's a good question. Right? So, because when we talk about, coaches building profitable coaching businesses, one of the questions is, how much revenue do you want to drive through your organization? How much revenue do you need to drive through your organization, your company, those kinds of things? And that is important, right? Like that's a part of the foundation of it. And some people forget about that. They're just like they almost take the Field of Dreams approach that if I build it, they will come. And I love that movie. I watch it at least once a year, if not twice a year. I love it, right? But at the same time, you do need to ask yourself, does this need to drive revenue? And certain things like your Bible study with your friends probably does not need to drive revenue at all. And it is so good for your heart. It's so good for your community. It's so good for your tribe. That's awesome. Right. But there are certain things where, and this is what we talk about with coaches, new or experienced coaches, is to have a mission-based approach to your revenue driving business. Okay. And a mission-based approach often starts with asking yourself the question, what do you want to see more of in the world? And that's a mission-based approach. Now, when I asked myself that question, way back when I got started, one of the things was, here I was, I was in that bad fit job that felt like it was killing my soul every day. And so when I asked myself that mission-based question, what do I want to see more of in the world? One of the things an answer that I got was, I want to see less people in the kind of position that I'm in. My job wasn't a bad job. It was just a bad fit job. And I was reminded of this just, recently I was asked to speak at a large organization, won't say the name, but I was asked to come and speak at their corporate headquarters. And I'll never forget, I got to the lobby and it's just this expansive, beautiful, lobby. And I don't know, it was probably like 8-story ceilings in this lobby. It was just so striking and beautiful. And the person, my contact, wasn't quite there yet. So I had to wait at security, watching people come in and out and then things like that. And what's interesting is I was in this beautiful, gorgeous headquarters, seeing people come in and out. And I would say about 70% of those people did not look on fire. 70% of those people would fall into the category of the grays, is what we call them. They're probably in, a high performing job. They probably are doing a pretty good job of it, but it doesn't light them up. It's not what you were put on the planet to do. And I know for me, that just made my heart race. Just like, I want to fix that, right? Like, that's why what your dream thing do is to help people to dream bigger, think better, and do more of what you're put on the planet to do, not just what gets you a paycheck, right? So again, that for me is a mission-based question. What do I want to see more of in the world? I want to see more people doing the kinds of things they were put on the planet to do. So now what's beautiful about that is a mission-based business. So I also, that is what I want to see more of in the world. How can I create products or services to help achieve that? So part of that for me is one-on-one coaching, success coaching. Part of that for me is speaking to large groups around these kinds of topics of, how do you come up with better solutions? How do you dream bigger, think better, and do more of what you're put on the planet to do? And then also part of it is equipping an army of coaches and speakers to go and do similar things, right? I figured out like that for me is a way where I can accomplish my mission. And I do believe that it's a God-given mission. How do I do that? But also have a business that very much, pays me well and drives revenue and it winds up being a blessing to just about everybody that we get to work with. So that it's that mission-based question. What do you want to see more of in the world? That's where it starts. And then to say, all right, how can I create products and services to help accomplish that goal?
Yeah. No, man, that beautifully well said. I feel like that corporate story of seeing, you said about maybe 70% of people don't look like they're fired up. That really resonates with me because I feel like time in and time in life, I had some soul-sucking jobs that I did not enjoy. I know you mentioned in your pharmaceutical sales, you had a job that you did not enjoy, and I'm sure there's people listening to this podcast are working a job they do not enjoy. And is this a common theme amongst people in humanity? And you have the privilege of talking to a lot of these CEOs and executives who are kind of responsible and core parts of that company culture. I'm curious, is that like a common problem that they talk about? And are there conversations that talk about resolving that issue or igniting employees so they can feel like they have more purpose in their job?
Yeah. Well, sadly, the data backs up that number. I say 70%. But Gallup recently released a study that looked at engagement, and sadly, they talked about that in the United States, about 70% of our workforce considers itself disengaged. So there's disengaged. And then there was a subset of that, 17% describe themselves as actively disengaged, which actively disengaged, ironically, or it's kind of funny, but sad.
Yeah.
Actively disengaged is basically people who are trying to look busy at a job that they do not enjoy. Right? Like, so actively disengaged is they are putting on a front of doing the work that they are not doing. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, well, just do the work you're supposed to be doing, that kind of, but 70%, 70% of the American workforce is disengaged or actively disengaged. That is horrifying. Like, if you own a company of more than 2 people, that is something you need to be focused on. And that is something, honestly, that I speak on quite a bit, because what's interesting about helping with engagement, a lot of organizations think, well, let's just increase people's pay. Let's get them better benefits. Like, those things aren't bad, but in general, they do not increase engagement.
Yeah.
What's interesting about what tends to, the number one thing a leader or manager can do to inspire more engagement in their team, the number one thing, you ready for this?
Take a guess.
Yeah, go for it. What do you think? What's the guess?
Encouragement or praise? I'm just kidding.
You would think so, right?
Yeah.
And that's up there. But the number one thing this data points to, the number one thing a leader or a manager can do to increase engagement in their team is to be engaged themselves.
Okay. And
how the manager who is engaged or fired up, that means they are fully present. They are doing their best work. They are inspiring their team by living the example of what engagement means. That person is exponentially more likely to have an engaged team themselves. But the manager or leader who's phoning it in, the manager or leader who doesn't really like their job, but they're still getting the results, that person is going to have a disengaged, unloyal team.
Yeah. Well, when I think about my experiences in the work field and what makes or breaks me enjoying my experience, it's really the managers that really make me enjoy the job or not. And I feel like a shitty manager will make you hate your job, and a great manager will make you love your job. And I feel like that's what makes or breaks it. But, oftentimes I feel like a lot of these corporate managers don't know how to connect with people well enough. And I feel like we often get gaslighted. I used to work as a pharmacist at Rite Aid, and I remember working with managers who were incredibly just inconsiderate. And there's times when I would literally be a pharmacist and you're supposed to have a team of like 2 or 3 technicians to help you. I would literally be all by myself, just working, like taking calls, helping people with insurance, literally running all around with no one helping me. And then corporate managers will come to me and be like, hey, why aren't you achieving your numbers? I'm by myself.
Right. Exactly. Well, it's that thing of what's interesting is that the data is really interesting in that when, the millennials is the largest group in the American workforce right now. That's the largest age group. And what's interesting about millennials, everybody's trying to figure out, how do we attract millennials? How do we keep millennials? The number one reason a millennial stays at their job And the number one reason a millennial leaves their job is the same thing, and that is their direct manager.
Yep.
They have a good direct manager, they are exponentially more likely to stay. If they have a bad manager, they are exponentially more likely to leave.
Yep.
And that's one of the things that, as a speaker and a trainer, that's something we try to help organizations to do, because leadership has always been important. Since the dawn of time, leadership has always been important. You do Bible studies on Saturday.
Yes.
It's examples of good leadership and bad leadership, right? So leadership has always been important, but in the American workforce, leadership has never been more important than
Yeah. And so, what can be done to make sure that managers are implemented in the right places so that employees can actually want to do their job and not quiet quit and actually be engaged? What are some instances or times where you've noticed that?
Yeah, well, I think it kind of goes back to some of the things we've been talking about is, managers are humans too, right? Sometimes it's hard to remember that, but they are. And so, oftentimes it's also a matter of making sure the manager is in the right seat on the bus. Some people got promoted into a management position because they had a heartbeat and they had done the job. So they just assumed, okay, we have an opening. This person's done the job. Let's get them in this position. But leadership is not their thing. It's not their sweet spot. And so sometimes you're fighting against powers that are way more powerful than any training can muster. So part of it is making sure or doing your best to get the right people in those roles. And that's not always the person that has been the best at the role that the team has, right? We do a lot of work with software as a service companies, software companies. And what's interesting is oftentimes in the past, people, will get promoted to lead a team of coders because they were good at code. But I would argue, and studies and research shows that oftentimes that's not the best reason to promote someone to lead a team of coders. And that's just one example. It can, it just in so many different industries, it's true. Sometimes the best sales leader is not the person that was excelling at sales. It's because they were good at reading people. They were good at motivating people. They were, had a good, solid ego that wasn't, cutting people down when they win, those kinds of things. So oftentimes great leadership starts with making sure that person is to be a leader. Not everybody's supposed to be a leader, and that's okay. Right. But then also once you've got those people on that seat on the bus, then equipping them with some of the things you were just talking about, some of the things we've been talking about is to ask questions, to not always provide the answer, but to hold your team as capable, to draw out the best solutions from your team, those kinds of things. Interestingly enough, in days past, oftentimes the leader brought value by having all the answers. That's not always the case anymore. That's not certainly the way you get engagement. Oftentimes now the best leaders are the ones who actually draw out the best solutions from their team and hold them capable of being able to deliver.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And I feel like nowadays, like we feel like we're supposed to have all the answers. I feel like that's the narrative. If you don't have all the answers, then there's something wrong with you, or you're not supposed to be in this position, or it can cause a sense of imposter syndrome where like, do I belong here? I don't know what I'm doing. How can we normalize that feeling and also make people deal with what is the answer to not necessarily, I guess now I'm being ironic, but how can we help people with not knowing all the answers,
As far as the leaders or the individuals,
the leaders or both. Both.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is probably my last one because I've got to run. But oftentimes it's the same thing with coaches. It's deciding and recognizing how you're going to bring value. Like I said in the past, oftentimes a leader, the way they brought value was having all the answers. But now, especially with as fast as technology moves, when you think about even in the last few years in any industry, in any marketplace, how rapidly change is happening, oftentimes the person who has been promoted to leadership, they're not doing the thing day in and day out. So they aren't the expert as much as they used to be. So now the best leaders are the ones that are asking questions, and they know they're bringing the most value, not by providing the answers, but by asking questions and drawing out the solutions from their teams. And so that's where it starts, is to remind themselves and focus in on, how do I bring the most value? And oftentimes it's not having the answers. It's about driving the questions.
Thank you so much for your time, Mitch. I appreciate your presence. For anyone who may be interested in learning more about you and connecting with you, how can people do that?
Absolutely. So they can go to mitchmatthews.com. That's kind of where most of our, kind of world lives. But I know, a lot of your folks are like you. They want to have an impact on the world. They might even be interested in being a coach, those kinds of things. I love that. And so we put together some free training for people like that. It's called the 5 Critical Questions. And they go to mitchmatthews.com /5CQ. 5 critical questions. And basically it's 5 critical questions you need to be asking yourself to see if coaching is the right fit for you, but then also to know what to do next if it is in fact the case. So mitchmatthews.com /5CQ is a great place to start.
Thank you, man. Well, hey, thank you for your presence. Thank you for your time. And I wish you best of luck with all your endeavors, and see y'all.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Great conversation.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Thank you. If you enjoyed this conversation, feel free to write me a review on Apple or Spotify and subscribe for more content. I'm on a mission to inspire as many people as I can, and your reviews will help me reach a wider audience. Thank you.